Let's get chapter 13 on the books. What is this chapter? Industrial Organizational Psychology. So I have good news. I promise this is a short chapter. There's only 11 slides, and one of them's a title screen, so it doesn't even count. Not that there's not a lot to this field, there's just not very deep coverage in an intro class. This is something you can get an entire PhD in just this subject. It is a fairly lucrative field, but you do have to have sort of an entrepreneurial spirit because you have to find. There are some companies that staff this, but most of the times you're a consultant, so you kind of have to put yourself out there and find work. Now, if you find it, you can charge an arm and a leg, but it's just not something that appeals to me. I kind of want a steady paycheck, even if it's a little one. Some people are geared for sales where, you don't know if you're going to make your quotas and, what your percentages are going to be. But when you do get paid, you get paid handsomely. So anyway, if you remember back to whatever chapter that was, one, I think, industrial organizational psychology is the field of psychology that operates within business ventures. So we'll kind of explore some of the different things that they do in that particular field. All right, let's see. So there we go. All right, IO psychology, a branch of psychology that studies how human behavior and psychology affect work and are affected by work. So again, in the business field. So they break it down into three components here. Industrial, which is the hiring. That's a whole thing in and of itself. How do you hire somebody? How do you tap the market of people and find only the qualified people, only the people that you really think would be good at that job? There's like a whole field of research about how to hire properly, how to train people. There's different methods that can be used for that, how to evaluate them, and then responding to those evaluations. It doesn't do any good to evaluate somebody and see, well, they need improvement, but then you don't do anything to improve them. Or you evaluate somebody and they're through the roof. Maybe we set our evaluation standard a little low, right? Maybe we should up that a little bit. Do you evaluate them based on a predetermined notion of what you think they should be able to do, or do you evaluate them based on how they compare to their peers? So there's a whole bunch of things to look at with evaluating, and then how do you respond to that evaluation. The second component is organizational. This looks at worker satisfaction. Very important, right? The more satisfied a worker is, the higher the morale is, the better the productivity is. How do you motivate people? Remember we talked about intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. So people that are intrinsically motivated, those are your golden unicorns. You don't have to worry about them. But the people, which is the vast majority of people, that are extrinsically motivated, well, how do we motivate them? Higher pay, some other kind of perks that we can do. Do we offer a coffee bar? Do we offer free sodas? Everybody likes free stuff, right? Do we allow them a more casual dress code? There's all kinds of things that might motivate somebody to do better. I know that was my biggest motivation as a teacher. They offered jeans and t-shirts for like $20. Was it every 6 weeks or every month? I think it was every month. I paid $20 a month. That went towards some school fund or whatever that they use. And it was money well spent for me. I was like, oh, I hate wearing khakis. So that was great. So everybody's got their weird things that motivates them. Commitment. You always want to battle turnover. It sucks as a business to hire somebody and pour a lot of time and training into them, and then they beef up the resume with that and burn off to someplace else. So, how do you get people to commit to stay? And then finally, employee relationships. And we'll talk about that one. That one's got a lot of pitfalls in it, in my opinion. And then human factors. Human factors are productivity, safety issues, health, and ergonomics. So these are kind of the three big areas of IO psychology. So ergonomics. I don't know how anybody thinks that this is a fun job, but hey, different strokes for different folks, right? It certainly doesn't appeal to me to do for an occupation, but people that look at ergonomics are looking at things like this. This is just a for instance, right? Office chairs. They actually make a huge difference, right? Are they adjustable here? Because guess what? Not everybody's the same height, right? So you don't want to sit in a chair where your leg is at an upward angle like that, right? You're too tall for that chair. That's going to cause fatigue in your lower half. You also don't want to sit in one of those super high chairs like a bar stool where your feet are just dangling even though you're 6'4". Who likes that? I hate that. Right? So those are super uncomfortable. Um, there's a reason that bar stools are made that way. If they made them super comfortable, well, people would stay there all night long. You'd never turn a table, right? So you want bar stools to be comfortable enough that people will stay for a while, but uncomfortable enough that after an hour or two, they're like, hey, check please, I'm ready to get up off this bar stool, right? So there is actually a reason for that. Things like the tilt of their screen, how high up it is, needs to be eye level. Let me look at this posture, right? It's very robotic looking. I had a job one time that kind of the big trend was people were getting those big exercise balls and sitting on those, and you'd sit there and you could kind of roll back and forth and go back and forth like this, and you'd say, "Oh, I'm working my core." Really, you're just fidgeting, right? But it sure beats sitting stiff in a chair. I know a lot of companies have gone to transitional desks that elevate so you can stand while you work for a little while, and then whenever your back starts hurting, your feet kind of start hurting a little bit, you lower it and you sit down. So you get the best of both worlds. You're not sitting on your butt all day long, but at the same time, you don't have to stand all day, so you get to choose. And that's a great option. Um, so anyways, ergonomics looks at this kind of stuff. All right, talk briefly about a man by the name of Frederick Winslow Taylor. This was a very influential guy. He needs to get a lot more praise than he does. If you go on to take any management classes towards a business degree, you will talk extensively about him. He is kind of the Sigmund Freud of the business world, if you will. He's one of the biggest names in management. So he wrote a book that he called The Principles of Scientific Management back in 1911. Very much ahead of his time. So he demonstrated that work rests increased productivity and reduced worker fatigue. So if you can imagine this, back in the Industrial Revolution, right, we had people working in steel mills and whatnot, that literally it was, you punch a clock and I'm paying you, right? I am not paying you to sit on your butt. I'm not paying you to take a break, right? You're going to work. If I'm going to pay you, you're going to work. And that was just common sense, right? And so workers were driven to work by their shop foremen and supervisors. And if you were caught sitting down or resting, I mean, you were fired. So there was no rest. And he came along, Frederick Taylor came along, and he said, that's not how people work. I mean, we need to take breaks. It refocuses the mind. You take a short break, you're re-energized physically, mentally, emotionally, to go back out there and perform the job. And you will perform better if you allow these work rests. Well, imagine you're the manager of a steel mill, right? And you're always looking at, how much you're spending on labor and what the productivity is. And now you get this guy saying, you need to pay people to sit around. So his ideas were not met with open arms, right? By anybody. Managers did not like the idea that they were going to have to pay laborers to take breaks and rest. But he demonstrated this. He found places that would allow him to test this, and did. And he found that productivity increased 4 times. That's astronomical, by the way, right? And here's the kicker, it reduced cost by 50% because you had less workplace injury, you had less turnover, you had less burnout. So all of those are costs, right? Those all transition into replacement cost. So, it's great if you can do one of those two things, right? If you can lower cost by 50%, oh, you have earned your keep forever, right? If you can increase productivity quadruple, you're a rock star too. But if you could do both at the same time, that's unheard of. It's not even possible, right? Well, he did it. And he largely did it through being more efficient. That was his big claim to fame, is he was an efficiency expert. So little tweaks here and there about how to be more efficient, and the additional work rests. So workers were afraid that this is giving too much power to management. And that's a bizarre thing, right? But basically, what Frederick Taylor said was that management should be the mental side of things, and then labor should be the physical side of things. So management basically should sit around and they should plan and they should predict and they should lead, and it should be all about you go over here and do this, and then you go over there and do that, and they should really be calling the shots. But that's really all they should do. And then, of course, the labor is the one saying yes sir, yes sir, yes sir, and then running around and doing all those things. So he fought for this bifurcated system where you had managers that were thinking and you had laborers that were doing. And before that, it was like your boss was right there next to you working, right? There was like a plant manager, but everybody worked, right? There wasn't anybody running around just directing. It was everybody working. And that, again, in a very basic, boiled down common sense way, that kind of makes sense, right? I mean, I own this shop. I want everybody in there working. I don't want this guy just sitting in an office thinking, right? Directing. I don't want that, right? Get out there and work. Get something done that I can physically see. So that's how it was done. But again, Frederick Taylor came in and said, no. You need to have people that are just directing traffic. And workers didn't like that. They didn't like the idea that there would be this ivory tower management that would just be sitting there, thinking and telling them what to do. So actually, laborers fought some of his ideas, even though he was fighting for work breaks. They didn't like that. They also thought it would lead to hiring fewer people because it's a more efficient system. And you know what it makes me think of is when I worked for the prison system, I went to the inmate laundry because it was a little bit better. It was a change of pace and it was a little bit better overall work environment than what I had been used to. And there were 65 workers, and in a nutshell, we had 1,500 inmates on that unit, and they're only allowed to shower one time a day. And the first thing I noticed in the first couple of days is we were doing 2 loads of laundry a day, and the industrial dryers and washers that we used could launder almost 2,000, like 1,800 sets of clothes a day, or per one wash. Is anybody doing the math on that? We only have 1,500 inmates on the unit. They're only allowed 1 shower a day. We can launder 1,800 sets of clothes in this industrial washer and dryer, but we're doing 2 loads a day, full loads. Something's not adding up, right? So I started paying attention to how things were going, and what I found happening was the system that they had all the clothes separated by size, right? So you had small, medium, large, extra large, so on and so forth. And the inmates would come in through the shower portion, and they would just go to a little window and they would call out their size. Large pants, large shirt. We had a guy on large pants, large shirt. He'd throw them to the window. Inmate would catch them, look at them, inspect them, and think, nah, elastic's not very good on these. There's a little bit of a spot on this. I don't want these. And he'd just toss them to the side. Literally throw them on the floor and say, no, large. And he'd get a second set. And he'd get a third set. And he'd get a fourth set sometimes until he found a set that he particularly liked. And that's not okay. So that was one of the issues. There was several other issues, but there was an inefficiency that was going on. So I redesigned the entire system. I gave every inmate on the unit a number, and I bought new clothes. We had kind of an allotment for new clothes to be purchased, and so I said, I'm not just going to buy them and throw them in the mix, right, and mix them in with all this other stuff. Basically, we're going to phase out the old clothes, and every inmate is going to have 2 sets. I think we started with 2 sets. 2 sets of brand new clothes that have their number. I think we wrote it. Their number was written on the inside of their clothes. And then we're going to redesign the layout. And we're going to have these aisles, right? 1 through 300 is going to be on aisle 1. 301 through, say, 600 is going to be aisle 2. We're going to have, 4 or 5 aisles, however many we need. And we're going to have little bins built. And now the inmate comes up and they say their number, right? They say 1210. And then 1200 aisle guy goes, I got that. And he goes over to 1210. He takes those clothes. And guess what? Now that guy's not inspecting them, right? Because that's all you got. So that's what you're going to wear. And if you put a stain on them, you're going to wear stained pants until new pants come along. So We went from laundering like 3,200 sets of clothes a day. Because remember, when they get those clothes and they didn't fit, they just throw them on the ground. So now they get swept up in the dirty clothes, even though they haven't been worn, they're not dirty. But we're laundering these clothes multiple times. So we went from 3,200 sets a day to like 1,200 sets because, newsflash, not every inmate showers every single day. So yeah, I cut efficiency, I mean, through making a system more efficient. Um, we cut productivity down. I'm sorry, we cut costs by 2/3, and then productivity went up so much so that I didn't need 65 workers. I really only needed about 20. So I tried to get rid of the other 40 people, but the problem was a lot of the people that were working in the laundry were working there because that's the only place they could work. They had hepatitis, so they couldn't work in the food industry. They had restrictions because of their sentence that they couldn't work, in field units or whatever. So, they have to work. So the laundry was kind of the last place they could go. So I kind of created a lottery system where I said, okay, well, I don't need this many people. Y'all are just going to be bumping into each other and getting each other's way. And, idle hands is the devil's workshop, as they say. So I don't need people sitting around with nothing to do because then you're going to start doing nefarious things. So basically, I only had everybody work about a third of their shifts. So you're on the schedule Monday through Friday, but I'm just going to use you Monday and Tuesday, and then I'm going to use him Wednesday and Thursday, and then I'm going to use him on Fridays, and you get the rest of the week off. But I tell you what, when you work with me on Monday and Tuesday, you better bust your ass. And they did, because they only have to work 2 days a week. They're getting credit for 5. Who wouldn't jump on that? So again, I had a smooth sailing, well-oiled machine. Everybody was on point, doing their job to the best of their ability. Yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir. But then they had the rest of the week off. So, I didn't know it at the time, but I was sort of employing some of Frederick Taylor's some principles of scientific management. And then, ironically, while I was doing this transition into this new system, I was taking business classes. And I finally took my first management class, and I started learning about Frederick Taylor, and I started going, well, duh. I mean, I'm doing that. I'm a stupid college kid. I don't know anything, and it just makes sense, right? It just made sense to look and see this inefficiency, and then how can I fix it? And then I fixed it. So I think I was born in the wrong time. If I was born in 1911, I would be Frederick Taylor, but he discovered it before me, so I independently discovered it. Anyway, so that's Frederick Taylor in a nutshell. All right, so back to their IO psychology stuff. Selecting employees, this is kind of a big thing, right? As I mentioned before, like how do you select them? So I was asked one time to write a job description for my job. I was hired at this, it was technically my cover job when I was working for the government. So they hired me to do this dispatching job on paper, but that wasn't going to work because a dispatcher dispatching trucks in Montana needs to be well aware of what the weather is like in Montana. Doesn't make a lot of sense to be dispatching 18-wheelers down a road that's got a 9-foot snowdrift on it. So that wasn't going to work. So after they initially had put that in my file, they decided, oh, we need to change that. We're going to make you like a communications man, like a logistics manager, right? So they said, help us write a job description, because I'd actually met with this company and learned kind of the inner workings. And then they created this, on paper position for me and said, if anybody asks, this is your cover. You need to be able to give us what your job is. So give us your job description, as if we were posting this to hire a replacement for you. And so I wrote like all the things that I did, right? And they came back and they go, no. We don't want just the things you do. Like, what type of person, would you want? So that was these two things, right? I was looking at it as a task-oriented thing, right? Lists of things that I do. I have to do an inventory check once a week of Qualcomm systems that are in the truck. I have to do new hire orientation training once a month for new hires. I have to do various reports for safety, and I was just listing these things, right? But they wanted somebody that, say, has an attention to detail. somebody that can work independently but yet also with a team, somebody that has good both written and oral communication skills. So that's kind of mixed, right? So most of the time, whenever you see a job listing today, that you see a mixed bag of task oriented, you're going to do these specific things, and also worker oriented. We need these kind of qualities in our future employees. So you'll see kind of a little bit of a mix. What about candidate analysis and testing? Um, I have seen some jobs that have kind of a mini IQ test. Believe it or not, Amazon does something like that. They have, even for just our basic warehouse staffers, they will have, and it's actually kind of fun. I thought it was pretty cool. It's all computer based, and I didn't actually interview with anybody for the position at Amazon. Not initially. I got the job straight through their online testing, which is kind of interesting. The middle management positions, you do have to go in and interview with the upper management, but other than that, the most entry level positions for Amazon, it's all computer based learning and testing, which I think is pretty cool. So one of the things that they had was for the like for stowing, for instance, it would give you a list of parameters, and it would say like a gray item can only go on the top shelf. A blue item cannot be next to or on top of or beneath a green item. Blue and green have to have at least one thing in between them before they can be stowed. All items are stowed by weight, and the weight is listed on the shelf. So where would you put the following items? And then it would have an item, right? And it would say, it was gray. Well, I know from the rules that has to go on the top shelf, right? So I look at the open spaces on the top shelf, and I'm like, okay, well, it's got to have to go on this spot, right? So you can plug that away. And then the next thing is a blue item. You go, well, I know I can't go next to green, so that rules out this open spot and this open spot and this open spot, and it can't go on the top shelf because that's for gray, and it can't go on the bottom shelf because it's too heavy, so this can only go in that spot. So basically it's timing you on this, right? So where would this go based on these, protocols, and you plug in the holes. So if you can do that, then you can work at Amazon. So that was pretty cool to see that. I've never seen more extensive testing than, especially from an IQ-based testing, than the job that I did for the government. I probably took about 12, and I don't even think there's 12 IQ tests. I mean, they had their own inventions done. It was crazy. But it was, they were different. They measured different components of IQ. Remember we talked about IQ and all the different spatial reasoning and linguistic and mathematics and all the different areas or whatever. They basically had an entire IQ test built around one area and just kept peppering them in. So that was crazy. But I mean, I can see after, training for the job, I can see what they were measuring, because it was a very, very, kind of intellectual thought exercise type job. So very abstract in what the position was. So, do you want to spend that much time and energy and effort in, fleshing out a candidate? I guess it depends on the job, right? If you're the federal government, sure, you got all the money. I mean, you're unlimited resources, basically, right? So, you really want the best of the best. And it doesn't so much matter what school they went to. You got your guy from Harvard. I mean, I beat out people that went to Ivy League schools for that position, and I know that because I met a few of them, and beforehand. It's not about your education. It's about, do you have the sort of intuitive nature, you have the intellect to get through the job. I'll tell you that one of the things I thought was pretty cool, and this is a little off subject, but it's pretty cool. So when they flew me to Washington, D.C. for the initial interview, right, they give you this email, right, and it says these instructions. And this is like some stuff out of a movie, but I swear to God, this is the truth. So they sent you this email, and it said, here's your flight, whatever, that's given to you. And then you're going to stay at this hotel that they put you in, right? But you have to catch a cab from from the airport to the hotel. Well, what they wanted you to do, and the email, it said, take a cab to this other hotel, and then sit in the lobby, and then ask for a different cab company to go to the other hotel, right? Do not leave and exit out of the same entrance, and don't use the same cab company, right? And don't divulge what you're there for any reason. And your cover is that you are in town to attend. I think it was it was something about foreign exchange students. To meet with somebody about a foreign exchange student. That was like the cover. And I mean, this is just an email that they're giving to a candidate, right? We have no training, right? But because I had the law enforcement, I had done just a little bit of counter surveillance training, just a little bit. And so I was a little bit familiar. But I thought, really? How are they going to know? I mean, I don't even meet with them until the next day. To this day, I still don't know if they had somebody watching us, or I don't know how they would know if you actually did those things, because I thought that would be part of the interview. They would ask questions about that. Never did. So I get there, I get to the hotel, I do all the stuff that I'm supposed to do. I get to the hotel. The next morning, take a cab and go to this building. And it wasn't like in the movies. It wasn't like CIA headquarters, right? It was just this nondescript building. It did have security gate and everything. You had to, buzz through and everything. Your name was on the list. So I get there and everybody's in suits and, business suits for women, and this huge waiting room. I mean, you probably could put 200 people in this waiting room, just sporadic tables everywhere, and everybody's kind of. And I'm trying to think, should I talk to these people and be social? I don't want to be the lone wolf over here in the corner by myself, right? That might send off a bad vibe. But at the same time, I don't want to get, like kind of bummed out that I've got Harvard and Princeton and Stanford people here, and I'm from a crappy college. I mean, I don't want to let that get me down. Plus, I don't really like people, so I kind of split the difference, and I hung out with them a little bit. And sure enough, there's some Ivy League people there, and I'm like, oh great, how am I going to compete with these dudes, right? And women. I mean, everybody there was just brilliant. So I was like, oh. So I kind of did go off to myself, and everybody kind of did that. And I'm looking around the room, and they came and physically get you, right? And they say, come with me. And you're like, oh, you walk in, the door slams behind you, and they stop right away and turn around and hand you a manila envelope. You open it up, and there's a picture of my driver's license. But it's not my driver's license. It is my driver's license. It's my picture. Nothing else on it is like me, right? It had a different name, a different address, a different birthday. And then underneath it said just occupation, what else did it say? Where I was from, and all these things, right? And it said cover. And again, I kind of knew what this was, right? So, but they don't tell you. They just literally just stone-faced hand you a folder. Open it up, and they say you have 60 seconds to read this. So I'm reading it, I'm trying to memorize this, right? So the name on it, I'll never forget, was David Wozniak. And do I look like a David? It's kind of weird. And Wozniak? What is that, Polish? Anyway. So I'm looking at that stuff, and the cover was I was meeting a Professor Zhao in Toronto to discuss onboarding up to 4 Chinese exchange students in exchange for Canadian exchange students. So I read this, and they were like, please have a seat. So I go back down to the waiting room, and then what seemed like hours tick by. It was only about an hour, but it's just like, oh my God, you were there forever. While that's going on, they come to that same door, and they open the door, and they call out a name, and they're mean. They're not nice. They come to the door, and they're like, Bob, we need Bob Johnson. And sometimes nobody answers, and they're like, come on, Bob, Mr. Johnson, we need you right now, or your name's going to be scratched off the list. And sometimes nobody would come, and they would go back inside, and I'm like, oh, dang, who gets this far in this process and then doesn't show up to the interview, right? That's weird. And then other times, they would call a name, and they would go into the door, and then they would just not come back, right? And then other times, they would call a name, they would go into the door, and within seconds, they would turn around, and they would leave the way that we had come. And so an observational person. I'm seeing this take place. I'm trying to put together what is going on, because the people that left look pissed. And And I'm seeing a lot of people that are not answering their name, like probably half. So it's weird. So they come to the door and they call Daniel Hageman, right? And I kind of casually look. And by the way, I had also noticed there are more applicants here, I think, than are applicants. I think that some of these people, because I'm watching them, they're looking at a magazine, but only with their face, but their eyes are looking all around the room. And I'm doing that too, right? And I'm a nobody. I'm just an applicant. But again, I just don't think that everybody is hyper vigilant like that, like I am. So I'm seeing this and I'm thinking, I think there's people planted in here that are just here to observe us. Are we flustered? Are we nervous? Are we talkative? Are we asleep? Are we playing on our phones? Do we look disgruntled, like we're pissed off that it's taken so long? Like, I think they're probably evaluating us. And there's cameras in the room. I mean, domes or whatever. Looks like cameras. So I feel like I'm being watched the whole time I'm there. So they called Daniel Hageman, and I'm thinking, I'm not going to answer, right? Because that guy, he didn't say anything, but he hands me in the middle of the floor and he says, "This is you." So I'm not Daniel Hageman. I'm David Wozniak, right? So they call Daniel Hageman, and I look around the room like, "Where's this Daniel guy?" I'm like, well, I guess he's a no-show. And they're mean. "Mr. Hageman, you don't answer right now, you will not be part of this process." Nothing. And they leave. I'm like, oh, sucks for that guy. So like 45 more minutes goes by, and then they open the door and they call David Wozniak. And I'm like, that's me. And I go to the door and they shake my hand and they say, "Congratulations for making it this far. Please follow me." And I go in. Now, remember I said before people were going in and instantly cutting back out? Now it's dawned on me, those are people that answered to their own names. Daniel Hageman, "Oh, that's me." You walk in, "I'm sorry, we had handed you a cover letter. This was supposed to be you, and you answered to the wrong name. So there's your exit." "Oh, but I didn't know. You didn't tell me." "Sorry, we need you to be able to figure that out." So, that was kind of the first test. It was pretty cool. And then I noticed he's walking me all through the building as if we were trying to get from point A to point B. But I also noticed he's taking the long way and he's asking me, "What am I in town for?" And, I told him, and he asked me where I'm from, just making small talk, right? And I tell him I'm from Toronto. And then he's like, "Oh my God, my brother lives in Toronto. What part of Toronto are you from?" And I've actually been to Toronto one time, and I was super fortunate that I didn't break on that right away. And when he said, "What part?" I go, "Oh, I live over by the university." Right? It's Toronto. I'm sure they have a university, right? And he was like, "Oh, no, that's great. That's great." So then I changed the subject and I started talking about something else, and I sort of steered him clear of that conversation. And that was the second test. So, when we talk about candidate testing, right? I mean, I've seen the extreme side of a candidate testing, right? I've seen, CIA selection process, which is months and months and months of tests that are sometimes you don't even know that they're tests. And then, of course, I've had jobs that you show up and they say, "What's your name?" And you tell them, and they say, "Can you start today?" And I say, "Well, yeah, I guess." So there's like no candidate testing, right? So again, it just depends on the job. You have to know, how important is it to get a certain kind of candidate? Can you just train pretty much anybody for this job, or do you need a very specific personality type or skill set for this job that really can't be taught? Um, there's all ends of the spectrum when it comes to this. Personality tests, sometimes you'll see a little shortened, like 16 PF type things. And Amazon does that, by the way. Work-specific tests, I think these are probably the most appropriate. Kind of like that, where would you stow this on what shelf thing that Amazon has developed. They have developed all of their own, by the way. They take sort of the principles of, different kinds of IO consulting type tests, and they built their own. They're very Amazon specific about how do you shelve things. Their management, they're very particular on their management principles, and everything needs to be guided by those principles. Even when you interview for management positions, you're expected to know what the management principles are, and then they will ask you scenarios, and you're expected to give them answers based on not just, "Oh, I think a good way to do it would be this," but you're supposed to use those management principles as sort of a guide. and say, well, according to the management principles, this is important, and so I would do it like this. So work-specific tests are really, really popular, and in my opinion, probably the best, depending on the job, of course. All right, moving on. Interviews. Here's a little, how not to dress to interviews. They say you should dress for the job you want, not the job you have. I always struggle with this because if you haven't picked up on it yet, I don't like dressing up. I just don't. So I don't like going to job interviews in suits. And I actually applied for a job, to be quite honest. I was just bored and I was looking for something different, new, and something kind of easy. And my uncle's he was a fighter pilot, and then he went to American Airlines, and he's a pilot for American Airlines. And we were talking, he was talking about flight attendants and how they could travel all over the place. And I thought, I've traveled a lot, but it's always been for work, and I want to travel for vacation. So I think it'd be cool to be a flight attendant. Can you picture me as a flight attendant? So I put in, and I got pretty far into that process. And that was interesting. They fly you to Dallas, where their major hub is. And I think they had, I forgot the exact number. It was like 32,000 applicants. And this is internationally. I mean, people apply from all over the world for these positions. And they only had, at the time, I want to say it was 200 positions. And so they interviewed 300 people. And I actually didn't get that job. And the reason I didn't get it is I wore suit pants and a suit shirt, but no tie and no jacket. I looked nice. I think I looked professional. I was very clean cut. I was much better in the interview as most people, because you interview in front of the whole room. So they put you in groups, and then they call you into a room like 10 at a time, and they go through and they ask the same questions, and they'll say, candidate number one, what would make you a good flight attendant? And you stand up and you give your answer. And then sometimes they'll say, candidate number 3, same question. Candidate number 7, same question. And then they'll say, okay, candidate number 2, and they'll ask you a different question. And then, that's kind of how it goes. But you interview in front of 9 other people. So I get to hear everybody. And everybody else stood up, and they were like, well, I think I would be good because I like people, and not a lot of confidence, not particularly well spoken, no eye contact. And I thought, no, they didn't get that. And then they came to me, and I public speak for a living, so this is pretty easy for me. So I'm looking them in the eyes, and I'm giving them what I think are pretty good answers. And lo and behold, later in the day, they call your name, and you're either going to walk you out of the building and say, sorry you didn't get it, or they're going to walk you to the other side of the building, and they're going to start paperwork with you, letting you know that you got the job. So they call my name, and I'm all cocky and confident, right? And they walk me to my car. And I was shocked. And I was like, can you tell me why? Oh, no, we don't have that information, sorry. But you can email the board that interviewed you and see. And so I did, and I was pretty persistent about it. And they wouldn't respond back, and not with anything definitive. And then finally they came back and they said, we didn't like the fact that you weren't wearing a suit. It didn't seem like you took the job very seriously. And honestly, I didn't take it very seriously. I mean, it wasn't like a career. It was more like a fun job for me. So that's probably something they picked up on. But it was mostly because of the suit. And my thought was, well, you wear a uniform to that job. They're going to tell you what to wear, and you wear that. So what difference does it make what I wear to the interview? Or I could wear t-shirt and jeans, right? I don't know. I'm not going to be working in t-shirt and jeans, right? So I didn't get that job because I didn't bother to throw on a jacket and tie, as crazy as that is. So, you never know what's going to be important in an interview. It didn't matter that I interviewed better. It didn't matter that I had better answers. It didn't matter that I was a stronger candidate, that I had much greater skill set than most of the people that were applying. It was just because I didn't have a tie. So, I say there are certain things that you really can't help, and there are certain things that you can. So control the things that you can control, right? You can control what you wear, right? Even if you got to borrow something, hell, even if you got to go buy a suit, leave the tag on an interview, and then go take it back. I mean, that's kind of the white trash way to do it, right? But hey, we've probably all done that at some point in our lives. So there's always a way. And sometimes, believe it or not, colleges will have a little library of clothes for that reason. I don't know if Lone Star does. I want to say they do. But you can actually, and I don't even know what department to get with. You'd have to do a little hunting and pecking. But I remember I was at some college. I don't remember which college it was, but they actually have loaner like dresses and suits that you can borrow to go interview for jobs in, which I thought was really really cool. Um, so, anyways, so okay, we have structured interviews, we have unstructured interviews. Both are good and bad. Of course, there's always pros and cons. So, a structured interview is what it sounds like, right? Here's a list of 10 questions. We have 10 applicants. We're going to ask all 10 of them the exact same 10 questions. The good thing about that is in a structured interview, you get to compare candidate number one, two, three, four, all the way through 10, right? Let's look at everybody's responses for question number two. Who had the best response? Who had the worst response? So there's a lot of comparisons that can be made, all right? And that's a good thing. The bad thing is you don't really get to know the people that much, right? You get to know their answers to questions. In an unstructured interview, somebody might say something off the wall. They might say, yeah, I'm from, Zimbabwe. And you might go, Zimbabwe? Well, how'd you get here? Well, you can't ask that in an unstructured question. I mean, in a structured interview, right? Because it's not on the list. So in an unstructured interview, you can kind of go wherever you need to go. If they say something interesting, you can dive into that a little bit. If they give you kind of a quick answer that's kind of, whatever, then you can dig a little deeper. Or you can ask them sort of a tangent question that, maybe bolsters their original answer. So I'm not a fan of structured interviews at all. Now, in an unstructured interview, if you did 10 unstructured interviews, well, now you have apples and oranges. You can't really compare each of the candidates against each other because you've asked them all different questions. So, that's the big drawback to an unstructured. But, again, I still favor unstructured personally. Things that get evaluated. Now, this is just what happens, okay? This isn't what should happen, what's ethical, what's morally appropriate. This is just something that research has shown this gets looked at, right? Whether you like it or not. First thing on the list is attractiveness. Now, there's some jobs that might matter, right? Some sales positions, for instance, that you might be able to make an argument. If you notice pharmaceutical sales, if you know anything about that industry, they don't hire ugly people. They don't hire overweight people. They don't hire old people. They hire young, attractive, model type people. If you don't look a certain way, you won't even get interviewed. And a lot of times they require you, and it's pretty weird that places would even do this these days, but they require you to submit a picture with your resume. How many times have you been asked to require a picture? Right? That doesn't happen often. But in that industry, they feel that you show up to sell, medicine to a doctor, please prescribe our pills or whatever, and you're going to wine and dine that doctor, giving them tickets to baseball games and taking them out to fancy dinners and, things like that, that you're going to make that sale easier if you're an attractive GQ model quality person than, some overweight person missing two teeth with a big giant mole and, a bunch of, things like that going on. They're not going to buy nothing from you. They're not even going to talk to you, right? So there's an argument to be made for certain occupations for an attractiveness quality, obviously like models and movie stars and whatnot. But does it matter how attractive you are to be a good manager? Well, again, there is research that shows that the more attractive you are, the more people will obey you, listen to you. They will hold you in higher regard. Probably one of the best managers that I ever worked for was this woman named Colleen, and she was god awful. She probably is that chick in that picture right there. But man, she was a go-getter. I mean, she would bark down guys and make guys cringe. And I mean, she had this fear quality that she could come up with, but she was also just super nice, super sweet when she wanted to be. But she could play both sides of that coin just perfectly. She was fantastic, but she was just not easy on the eyes at all. So, attractiveness is something that's there. So what am I getting at? Well, again, control what you can control, right? Look your best, all right, whatever that is. If you can spruce yourself up to an 8 or a 9, then more power to you. If you can spruce yourself up to a 4 or a 5, well, you should. Don't go in there and think, well, I ain't all that, so my hair's all messy and I ain't showered in 3 days and all that. I mean, you want to present yourself professionally. Likability. this is one of those intangible things, right? They leave and you evaluate their questions, their answers to the questions, but then you have a conversation with the other people in the room. And you're like, did you like them? Did they put off a vibe that they were cocky or arrogant, or did they put off a vibe that they were kind of social, pariah? Like, I don't like people. Like, I'm going to answer your questions, and maybe they nailed the interview with all the right questions, but they were kind of sour, just me, with how they talked. So how likable are they? And I got rejected for. I've been rejected for a lot of jobs. I applied for a job with the DPS to do commercial. What do they call it? Inspections. It's like those weigh stations on the freeways. They work with state troopers, and they go out and they do the safety inspections of vehicles. And then if you don't pass everything, then you call a trooper over, and the trooper will cut you a ticket. And if you pass everything, then they sign off and you drive off. So it's an easy job. And I have knowledge of transportation code, right? Coming out of law enforcement, so I felt like I had a leg up. So I interviewed, and it just so happened that the five people that worked in that office were black females, and then there was me, and I was the strongest candidate that interviewed. But what it came to, and you know what, I'm not the type that would like sue or be upset about this because that's the world that we live in. But I didn't get the job, and I definitely had the best interview. There was a typing test, and I passed that. There was kind of a personality / MMPI type test, and I passed that. And then there was a physical test, and I blew everybody away on that. You had to like climb up on top of an 18-wheeler, and you had to lay down on a crawler and scoot underneath one, and you had to do some stuff like that. So I did all that stuff. You had to carry these 45-pound weight things that the trucks park on it. That's what weighs the truck. And everybody was carrying one at a time. You had to do 4 of them, one for each tire, and I carried 2 at a time and did it twice as fast. So, I mean, I blew everything away, but I didn't get the job. And I asked the manager why, and he said, well, there was 2 reasons, if I'm being honest with you, just between me and you. And again, I really appreciated him telling me the truth on this because, you learn from that. And so I know, I better not do that again. He said, number 1, you oversold yourself. In the interview, we said, this is we require you to do this many inspections per day and this many, there was all these different things, right? This many per day. What do you think of that? And I said, I think that's a good starting point, and I'd like to see if I could double that. And he was like, what? And I'm like, well, I like to challenge myself, and I'm competitive. So, if that's the minimum, I don't want to shoot for the minimum. I mean, you're telling me this is the minimum that I need to do. Okay, I think I should be up to speed in doing that within a week or 2. And then after that, I'd like to do that plus half of that. And I'd like to ultimately get to the point where I'm doing at least twice what's required of me because, and he was like, whoa, this guy is going to be a handful. And in retrospect, I see that. And the other thing he said, you're a very likable guy, but I don't think you're going to get along really well with the other workers. I mean, you don't really have anything in common with them. And I think what he was saying, reading between the lines, is I don't think a white guy is going to fit in real well with 5 black women. What are you going to talk about? What music are y'all going to listen to when y'all have to drive to these places? I mean, y'all aren't going to they're all friends outside of work. I don't see you going over to their house for a barbecue, and again, it wasn't anything in the interview. I passed everything with flying colors, but there was a likability factor that I think was a question there. I don't think he thought that my coworkers would like me very much, or that I might like them, and that might create conflict. And so, he just chose to go with somebody else that, even though they interviewed less, they're a better fit for the position. And I can appreciate that. It sucks for me, but I mean, I can appreciate that. So, pretty cool. All right, confidence. They look at your confidence level. What I tell people on that is fake it till you make it. Right? Everybody goes into a job interview with little confidence, right? Because it's the unknown. I don't know what this job is. I don't know the ins and outs. I think I'd be good at it, but I don't really know, right? So you have that doubt. But you gotta squash that. You gotta go in there like, I'm gonna kill this job. This job is going to be like a piece of cake. I don't know what it is. I don't know how to do it, but I'll learn and I'll do it well. So you kind of have to fake that until you make that. That's what I say. Similarities with others in the workplace. So that's what I was talking about before. What is their health? Don't you think that's important if you're a manager and you have somebody that walks in the office and they just have kind of a spring in their step, and they sit down and they're just like, or you have somebody else that comes in and they're hunched over and they're holding their back, or they're walking with like a bit of a limp and they're kind of slow, and then when they go to sit down, they sit down and they're just sitting all kind of like this in their chair. I wouldn't hire that person, and I probably wouldn't articulate it because I don't want to get sued, but my first thought is they're going to be slow. They're probably going to call in sick a lot. They probably have a lot of doctor's visits. There's a lot of reasons why, as a manager, this person's going to give me headaches. So why would I hire that whenever this person is obviously more healthy, right? A lot of times now, places are asking if you smoke, if you're a smoker, and that's a big deal, right? Because you're going to need smoke breaks. You're going to be sneaking away to go steal a cigarette every once in a while, right? So that's a big issue. Sorry. Need a drink. All right. Communication ability. How effectively do they communicate? Do they speak well? Do they carry themselves well verbally? It's so funny to me at work. I'm in a forklift and I'm driving around just like everybody else. And then the next week comes out and I train people. And so I train on Thursdays, all the new hires. And then I train on Thursdays, and then Fridays and Saturdays, I'm just kind of doing what everybody else is doing for the most part. And everybody thinks that I'm everybody's boss. And it's funny to me because I'm not everybody's boss. And I'll ask why, and I get the same answer every time. They're like, well, just the way you carry yourself. I mean, you don't act like a warehouse worker. You don't talk like a warehouse worker. And at first I took it as almost like an insult, like maybe I was bossy or something. Like, you don't act like a worker. You act like a boss. Like, I hope I'm not running around telling everybody you do this and you do that, which I kind of do. And everybody listens and nobody bitches. People come to me and they're like, hey, I'm done with this. What should I do next? And I'll look and I'll give them a task to do, right? But technically, they probably should be asking somebody else, not me. But everybody kind of has accepted that I'm kind of like the informal leader, I guess. And so, and I ask, people come in, they're like, oh my God, you're not the manager of the shift? I'm like, no, Jason's the manager of the shift. I work for Jason just like you do. And they're like, oh my God, I thought you were the manager. I thought he worked for you. And I'm like, why? Why would you think that? And they say, again, just because the way you communicate with others, the way you conduct yourself. I mean, I've never heard you speak improperly. So I took that as a little bit of an insult at first, like maybe I was too bossy, but I think now it's a huge compliment. It's just how you carry yourself, and that translates in an interview, believe it or not. It starts in an interview. Again, you don't want to go into an interview using slang. You don't want to, they ask you, hey, how did you like your last job? You don't go, oh, it was Gucci, man. Don't say that in an interview, all right? My last job was, it had its strong points, and then elaborate or whatever. Social factors like manners, I'll tell you that right after I graduated with a business degree, right, I was interviewing with some accounting firms. I interviewed with Deloitte & Touche. Who else? I can't remember what they were now. It's 20 years ago, but and I didn't want to do that job anyway. But they all took you out to dinner, and I read a book on social etiquette for job interviews, and I was floored by the things that were in there that I still to this day don't agree with, but they exist. So one of the things was don't order the most expensive thing on the menu, even though you're not paying for it, right? It's very tempting whenever I'm in a job interview and you're footing the bill to order, steak and lobster, but it kind of sends a bad message, right? Also, don't go in there and order barbecue, right? I mean, although barbecue is amazing, who wants to interview somebody and they've got barbecue sauce and grease and they're gnawing on a bone, right? So, again, it's a manners thing, right? I don't want you now. If me and you're just hanging out, we go grab barbecue together. That's one thing. It's fun. It's a fun setting, right? We're hanging out. But again, if it's an interview and I have to look at you while I'm talking to you, I don't want to see grease coming all down your face, right? So, be mindful of what you order. You should, whenever you walk into an office to be interviewed, you should never sit down before you're offered a seat. Um, Little things like that. A lot of people maybe just don't know that, but you should follow them in. Your jacket should be buttoned, and then whenever they say please have a seat, as you're sitting, then you unbutton your jacket. Um, One of the things I thought was interesting was don't ever salt your food before you try a bite. So I usually don't use salt. I'm not real big on salt, except red meat. I will like a steak. I don't care how it's cooked or what expensive steakhouse it is. I think it always needs more salt. So I know I'm going to put salt on a steak. But if I'm in a job interview and for whatever reason I ordered something that had steak, right? It says the etiquette rule is take a bite before you salt it, because what you're saying is I'm not going to just impulsively do something, right? I'm going to sample it, see if it works. Nope, it needs salt. Now I'm going to add salt, right? That's kind of the way to go. You should always taste it first, right? That just makes sense, right? So that was, I thought, a pretty good rule. Something I wouldn't have thought to do. Things like if you go on a dinner job interview and there's like the big thing of bread and you want a piece, right? Don't grab the loaf of bread here, cut off a piece, and then you take the piece, and now you've touched that whole loaf of bread, right? That's not the way to do it. So it's the other way. You hold the tip and you cut off that, and then you only take the piece that you've touched, basically. So anyways, a lot of social factors, a lot of manners and everything. I know that one of the things that I thought was pretty cool, I used to read books by an author named, what's her name? Oh, Patricia Cornwell. And they followed the medical examiner. This is a fictional thing, but Patricia Cornwell, the author, was actually married to, I want to say, an FBI agent. Might have been a federal prosecutor. I think it was an FBI agent, though. So she would hear about cases and stuff, and then she basically would kind of dress them up just a little bit and put them in her book. So they weren't real, but they were kind of loosely based on real cases. And she was in the book. Case Carpetta was a medical examiner, and so there was a lot of forensics involved, and there was a lot of kind of investigation tactics, and it's just kind of hoity-toity, right? Kind of highfalutin. And I remember one time they would always say like she pulled out her Mont Blanc pen to sign the death certificate, blah blah blah, and they used that several times. Mont Blanc. I'm like, what the hell is that? So I looked it up, and Mont Blanc, if you don't know, it's a very very high end. They sell lots of other things, but they're known for their pens. They have like fountain pens and ballpoint pens, and they're like inlaid with 24 karat gold, and their most basic version, right? Their bottom dollar pen is like $400, right? So when I graduated college, I had asked for that. I just thought it would be a cool thing to have because I had been reading about it in this book. So I got a Mont Blanc fountain pen as a graduation gift from my parents, and I had that in my shirt pocket at my suit for a job that I interviewed for. And it was one of the first things that he noticed because it's got a very distinctive kind of star on the top of the pen. And he was like, oh, Mont Blanc, very, very nice pen, right? And it sends, and I also had a Jones, New York, $1,500 suit. I didn't have a $99 JCPenney suit, which, by the way, I own 3 of, all right? So I'm not knocking it. But this was a corporate job for Bank One doing corporate investigations. My very first real big major interview out of college, and I did get this job, by the way, and then it fell through before I could actually start. But he noticed he noticed my shoes, he noticed my suit, and he noticed my pen, and he said, "Yeah, this guy comes from money." I did not come from money. My parents were super poor, right? I mean, I grew up like very bottom middle class. So, but I had read these books about this lifestyle, right, that I had no part of, and I knew about suit brands, and I knew about these pens, and I kind of knew the right stuff to put together, and it was noticed. I went on this interview, and they noticed how I was dressed. They noticed the pen that I used, and it got me the job. I mean, the guy thought, yeah, this guy fits. You know, this guy is already like upper management written all over him. Um, so, anyways, I would highly recommend doing a little research, right? Doing a little research on jobs that you're going to interview for. And then self-promotion, you know, how eager are you? If anything, I overdo that, as I mentioned. So I've kind of shot myself in the foot a few times, overselling myself. So you want to find that balance, right? Sell yourself, really show how you can be an asset, but don't come across like you're so much better than everybody that you're gonna just be an outcast, which I've done a couple times. All right, training and evaluations. So computer-based learning, we live in this toilet paper apocalypse, you know, crazy Rick Moranis getting punched in the face 2020. So, you know, we're all at home now, right? Computer-based learning has been huge for a long time, and now it has absolutely taken off even more so. So I would say it's probably the norm, and it will probably continue to be the norm going forward. Um, there's like 9 different pits at my Amazon job. A pit is a powered industrial truck. So your forklift, your clamp, your reach, your turret, your side rider, your electric power jack, your order picker. What else? I think that's all that I have in my building. So these are all, you know, mechanical devices that you have to stand in and you drive. It's got a steering over here and a throttle over here, and the turret, you've got multiple different handles. It's like kind of a big crane looking thing, right? All of them required computer-based learning first. Even though it's a very hands-on experience, right? It before you can get to the practical application, right? All of the learning part of that. This is the steering column, and this button does the forks going up and down, and this one makes them go left and right, and this one makes them tilt front and back, and this is your going forward, and this is your going backwards. And if you want to stop, you need to plug, means you go the other way. And if you want to, all of that learning is done on the computer. And once and it's through videos and pictures, and it's very interactive. They pause every once in a while, and it'll say, click on the part of the picture where the guy's hand placement is wrong. Or not hand placement, but 5 points of contact, or, you know, 2 hands, 2 feet, and then your back is against the back wall. And then there'll be pictures where somebody's got like 1 foot up or 1 hand off. And it'll say, click on the part of the picture that's not right. And you have to look at the picture and click on it. And I mean, it's excellent. It is excellent, excellent training. And when people come through the practical portion, which I teach, I mean, I can tell who watched those videos and who just turned the video on, walked out of the room, and then came back and went, what do I have to do? I'll click there, and then they walk back out of the room again. I can tell. So those computer-based learning modules, I've seen those in every job that I've had. I have them for Lone Star. We have to do computer-based learning for how to, you know, work D2L, how the whole COVID thing should be handled. Computer-based learning for the police department. We had a lot of that. Lots of, you know, videos of like traffic stops and what they do right and what they do wrong, that kind of stuff. So it's very cost effective. Making a video is not particularly expensive. Normally companies can hire somebody to come in and do it and shoot the video, edit the video, and then you know, an IT department that can put it together. Sometimes they do it in-house. Sometimes they sort of subcontract that out. Usually you get volunteers, people that already work there. Most people think it'd be cool to be in a training video. So it's not usually very hard to find volunteers for that. Mentor programs, learning by good examples is linked to enhanced job performance. So the reason that that's in capital letters is because, unfortunately, I have seen quite a few jobs where you can be really good at your job and not be a good trainer, right? Doing something and teaching something are very, very different, right? And I liken that to like, you know, take Bill Belichick, right? I think he's the coach of the Texans. I'm not a football guy, but I think, so I'm using a football reference and I don't know anything about football. But, right, he is or was, I guess, the coach, right? Is he as good of a quarterback as whoever the quarterback is? No. Is he as good of a defensive player as J.J. Watts? Of course not, right? So even though he leads the team, he's not as good, he's not even particularly good at any of those positions, right? But he can lead them. Just like, I forget his name, the guy that was the famous gymnastics coach, been a gymnastics coach for Bella Lugosi, is that right? I can't remember if that's his name. Anyway, I mean, he's training gymnasts to do flips and twirls and all that. I bet man can't even do a somersault, right? So doing something and well, and then training somebody to do something are very, very different skill sets. Um, and a lot of times people don't recognize that. And so people think that, if you do the job well, you'd be a great trainer. Not necessarily, right? So it's really, really important whenever you train a trainer and I've done this before. I've been in that position, like with the police department. I was one of the first crisis intervention trainers when that became a thing, and it's how to specifically deal with mentally ill. And so I became a CIT officer, and then it was mandated that we needed a whole bunch more of those. So we needed to basically put the whole department through my course, and I had to pick people to be trainers. And I had sergeants going, "Oh yeah, you should use this guy. He's really good." And I'm like, I don't think he'd be a good teacher. He's not very patient. He doesn't communicate very effectively. He knows one way to do it, and that's what he does, and he does it well. But if somebody else needs other examples, I don't think he's going to be able to give those. Um, and I had other people that may not have been as strong of an officer, but I think that there's something about them that I think lends itself well to teaching. So it's important as a manager to pick people to be trainers that are good at the job that they're training and at the training aspect of it. All right, so those are both kind of important. Up close evaluations without the feelings of micromanagement. I don't think anybody likes to be micromanaged. I've quit jobs because I can't stand to be micromanaged. Give me a job and trust me to do it. And if you don't trust me to do it, I don't want to work for you. Um, so I mean, I promise I will do the job well. I don't need you breathing down my neck, telling me, okay, do this. Okay, now you need to do that. Okay, oh, you need to do more of this. Okay. Back off, right? So let's see where else. Networking benefits. It's always good to know people. That's one of the things about being a trainer at my job that's worked out really well unexpectedly for me was that we have an inbound side and we have an outbound side, and they have nothing to do with each other. The inbound receives all the merchandise from like the vendors that sell us, pallets of exercise bikes or whatever, right? And then we go put it on the shelf. And then the outbound people are the order pickers. Susie Q bought a exercise bike. They go pull it off the shelf and put it in a bin to be, delivered to her house. So inbound receives it, outbound picks it and sends it out. And we really don't interact with each other, right? We have very different, literally opposite jobs. So nobody from inbound knows anybody from outbound and vice versa, but I know everybody because I trained everybody. So everybody that operates in any piece of equipment in the building goes through me. And so because of that, there are people that know my name that I don't, and everybody's wearing a mask, right? So I don't recognize people, right? Because of the masks. And we have these big vests, these reflective vests on. So, oh, I just froze for a second. That was weird. So yeah, I mean, I don't recognize people, but everybody seems to know who I am because they've gone through my training, and so and everybody knows all my business too. So there's good and bad because I don't like that. But anyway, it's worked out well. Upper level management, literally the highest manager in the building, knew who I was the first week because of my job performance and because people have talked about me, and in hopefully a good way. So lots of networking benefits to being paired together with a mentor. Performance appraisal, a 360-degree system is where everybody evaluates everybody. And that's kind of interesting, right? It's interesting for a subordinate to evaluate their boss. And if you're in a position where you have a subordinate that is evaluating you, as teachers are, right? We get evaluations, and not that students are subordinates, but for lack of a better word or example, I mean, I'm up there with a PhD knowing the material pretty well, right? Proven that I know the material. And then you have a student that is going through an intro class that just graduated high school like a month ago, right? And they get to evaluate me. I mean, does that seem a little weird, right? That they know nothing about life yet, but they get to evaluate me of all people. So it's sometimes you look at that and you're like, are you freaking kidding me? But you have to take those evaluations with a grain of salt, right? And you have to build kind of a pattern, right? If I got one review that came in and said, "Oh my God, this guy sucks at everything he does. Right? He's a horrible speaker. He's a horrible teacher. He doesn't know his material. Blah 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 blah." That'd be a red flag, right? But is it a disgruntled student that didn't like their grade, or are they onto something, right? So you kind of put that to the side and you wait for more. And if you get more and they say similar stuff, well, then now you start to pay attention to it, right? So that 360-degree system is effective, but it doesn't work the other way. You have, if you're a manager and you submit a really bad evaluation of an employee to your management, they might say, yeah, you need to get rid of that person. That's just that. It's just that easy. Now, if the subordinate says the same stuff about the manager, then that same manager might go, well, you're the only one that thinks that. So you obviously just have a personality conflict with them, and those happen. Sometimes you just don't get along with somebody. The 360-degree system in practice, it doesn't really work equitably. So you kind of have to take the with a grain of salt just a little bit. All right, bias in hiring. Bias is a prejudice in favor of or against one thing, person, or group compared with another. So we talked about prejudice, right? It means to prejudge. So my question is, are biases conscious or are they unconscious? Well, the answer is both. Sometimes we're very aware of our bias, and like I am with, I've mentioned it many times, I'm very biased against people that maybe dress a certain way or that speak a certain way. I wouldn't hire those people. Not that they're bad people, not that I think ill of them, like in a personal level, like, I hope some harm comes to them. It's not like that. I just don't want to work with that. I want to work with a certain caliber of person, and I think somebody that demonstrates an inadequate speech is not somebody that is up to the caliber of work that I would expect. So, if you can't get that part right, I don't think you're going to get the job right either. So that's a bias, and I'm not saying it's right, but it exists, and I'm conscious of it. And there's probably other biases that I'm unconscious of. And my favorite example of that, when I was at Sam Houston as an undergraduate, I had a professor named Dr. Merlin Moore, and he was the former assistant chief of police in Eugene, Oregon, and he would do these job fairs and to try to get people on the department, and they only had guys that were applying, and then they hired a new person that was a female, and she said, "You're doing it wrong." And he was like, "What are you talking about?" And she was like, "Well, you're taking you yourself and 3 other of your buddies to these job fairs, and y'all are all these hulking, big, giant guys. No female student at the college that you're going to is going to walk up to a table of 4 giant police officers and go, 'I want to be a police officer.' It's not a very inviting setting. You're bringing your buddies. You need to bring a diverse crew to the recruitment, right? You're a big white guy. You need to bring, kind of an average black guy. You need to bring, maybe a Hispanic woman, and then a white woman. Imagine what the responses would be there." And he was like, "I never thought of that. All right, we can try that." So that's what he did. He diversified the panel of people that were at the table, and lo and behold, all these female students came up. And he'd been going to this college for years and years and years, never had a female come up. So just the changing of the guard and him having, females up there, other females were more approachable to the female officers. So that was an unconscious bias. He didn't even realize he had that, right? He just was going up there with his buddies, right? You get a paid weekend. You can stay in a hotel and all your food's paid for, and you get to see, college campus for a while. So I thought that was a really good example of how sometimes somebody else from the outside can come in and show you that you're kind of doing something in a biased fashion that you're unaware of, and we all have that. So that's kind of the answer to the next question. How can we fight against demonstrating bias in the hiring process? Have a panel, all right, and check each other. If you have a panel of 5 people, you have 5 different biases in the room, right? Hopefully your bias, like for me, is singular and nobody else has that. Somebody else would, 4 other people would go, All right, so the guy's pants were sagging a little bit. It doesn't mean he wouldn't be good at this job. We should hire him. And if I'm outnumbered 4-1, I might be willing to overlook that bias, right? But if I'm in there and I have sole authority all day long, that guy with his pants down around the bottom of his ass is not getting this job. So, having a panel interview is always best because you kind of play off of each other's strengths and weaknesses. All right, EEOC, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, responsible for enforcing federal laws that make it illegal to discriminate against a job applicant or employee, both of them count, because of a person's race, color, religion, sex, national origin, age, disability, or genetic information. And I think, and I need to look this up, I should have looked it up before this lecture, but I'm thinking they just added a couple of things to this because it didn't used to be sexual orientation. They can't discriminate against you based on your sex, male or female. But if you're gay, they still could. And I think they've changed that to where now they can't. So I'll have to look that up. But anyway, I actually had a weird situation. Oh my God. This guy, this job that I used to have briefly, he liked he liked the word fag. And he called people fag all the time. And he'd be like, hey fag, you get that report fag? All the time, right? I was just like, it's a little bitty dude. I did not approve of that word. I did not approve of that way, but it had never been directed at me, so whatever. Well, then one day he asked me that question and he called me that. And, I got thick skin. I've been called way worse by people that I actually had some respect for, so it didn't really bother me, but it was the principle, And so I called him out on it. And so then he just amped it up, Then it was daily. And I basically let it go for a little while, and I tried to go through the right chain of command. I went to his boss, said something about it nonchalant. He just blew it off. I went to the general manager, and I brought it up a little more forcefully, and he said, that's just how he is, and, I'll fix it. He didn't do anything. So then the guy came up and said something to me again, and I got in his face, and I let him know real quick, dude, I'm married and I have 2 kids. You're calling me a derogatory homosexual word, and you have chosen a job to work in a warehouse with all men. You have a guy roommate, and you have no girlfriend that anybody is aware of. Obviously, you're the one in the closet, so I don't suggest you go projecting that out on me. And by the way, if you call me that again, the next words will be coming out of a broken jaw. So try it again. And the hush in the room, right? Everybody was like, oh. So he goes off. And he starts crying. So he started crying because people started making fun of him that I put him in his place. And so my management came to me and wanted me to go apologize. I was like, no, that's not going to happen because I don't do fake apologies. And if I was really sorry, then I would apologize, but I'm not. I mean, I tried to do it the right way. I tried to go through the proper chain of command, and y'all didn't do anything because y'all are bad managers. And so I told you what was going to happen if you kept doing it, and I handled it, and you better just be glad it didn't get physical. So, no, not going to apologize. So I was terminated, and I thought about suing, and I called a lawyer, and I said, isn't that some sort of like sexual harassment or some kind of discrimination or whatever? And basically the lawyer was like, no. I mean, again, you're married with 2 kids, so you're definitely not homosexual. And, if he was calling you that and you were a homosexual, it wouldn't matter because he could do that and they could fire you for being a homosexual. And I was shocked to hear that. I could not believe that was the law. But again, I think they just changed that like within the last couple of months. So I'll have to look that up. Anyways, all right, moving on. Job satisfaction. This is just a whole bunch of different things that factors that lead to job dissatisfaction or satisfaction. So having good autonomy, individual responsibility and control. So interestingly, in my dissertation, I actually looked at these things as individually, and almost all of them are on a spectrum. So having autonomy in a job is great, right? Having individual responsibility and control over your job is good for a lot of people. But if you have too much autonomy, right, you're too distant from the company or the organization, then that's a bad thing. And you can go through all of these, and it kind of works that way. Like work demands, for instance. If you have too much work, then you're stressed out, right? But I actually had a job where I had not enough work. Because I'm sitting around twiddling my thumbs and bouncing a ball off the wall all day long. I got really good at that. I could all day long. Never missed. So, having too much work is bad. Having too little work is bad. So you want to find that middle ground. It's that Yerkes-Dodson thing. Remember that too much stress, too little stress, little bell curve, right? The optimum level of what is it? Stimulation. So coworkers, same thing, right? If I have a whole bunch of coworkers and I'm like, I don't like that, I don't like people, right? If I don't really have anybody, I just show up and it's just me the whole time, that sucks too. So all of these are kind of on a spectrum, right? And as a manager, you kind of have to go through each one of these and make sure that everybody's optimal level is different. Remember we talked about that. So work demands, I want a lot of work demands. Right? If you give me too little, I will be much more miserable than if you give me too much, because I operate better under stress. So if you give me too much, that stress is going to fuel me, and I'm going to do well. But if you give that same amount of work to any of my coworkers, they would probably burn out in a week. Right? So everybody is different on every one of these factors. So again, industrial organizational psychologists are very useful because they can come in, they can individually test people, and it doesn't take very long. You individually test them to find out where their levels are. Then you find out in reality what's actually happening, and then you can give very specific feedback to management. This particular worker needs a little bit less autonomy, meaning you need to check in on him a little bit more. His work content needs to be a little more varied than what he's currently got. You need to provide him some more positive feedback. He doesn't feel like his work is ever appreciated or whatever, so some affirmations would go a long way with him. He could go down this list and give you, as the manager, a checklist of stuff to do to get more productivity out of that worker, to increase morale out of that worker. And then the same thing for the next worker. So, testing for this kind of stuff is really, really, really valuable. And again, something I actually have a little bit of experience with through my dissertation. So, interesting stuff to me. All right, work teams. We talked a little bit about this through the social psych chapter, so this is not new information, but some of the drawbacks include social loafing. We talked about that, right? You put somebody on a team and they think, I only have to do 20% of the work because there's 5 of us, right? So if we all do 20%, that's 100%. Not everybody puts in 100%. I only have to put in 20%. That's social loafing. Sometimes there's poor communication skills between members. So individually they would do well, but you put them together on a team, and even though individually they do well, they don't communicate well for whatever reason. And so they end up sort of not doing the work, or they do all of the work, and then this person does all of the work, and now you got the project, you got all this extra work that was just wasted. Group conflicts, obviously that can always happen, right? You put together even competent teams, and you can always have personalities that sort of clash, so you have to deal with that. And then there's the team halo effect. The team is credited with successes, but failures are blamed on individuals. So, you celebrate as a team, that you win, but then whenever things don't go well, and you come in second or third, then everybody starts pointing fingers at, well, you didn't do this, and you could have done more of this. I did everything great, but so that can lead to future conflicts. So lots of drawbacks to work teams. And then the last thing is managing different generations, and this could be a whole class in and of itself. So baby boomers, there's the years, Generation X, and then millennials. Things to say about the millennials, they believe their technological superiority over other previous generations. And is that true? Probably. Millennials grew up in a technological age, right? I never forget, I saw a baby at Target one time, right? I was looking at a frame, and there was a mom with a baby looking at a frame next to me, right? And she holds up this frame to look at it, and the baby started smiling. It was a little baby, right? And the baby started smiling, and so she was playing into that, and so she turned, and she was like, "You like that? Do you like that picture?" And the baby reached up and started swiping at the picture. Obviously, this kid grew up with an iPad, right? And he's trying to go to the next picture and see what it was. So, I mean, this baby couldn't even talk yet. Not even a year old, probably right close to a year. And the baby is swiping at a picture. Just to goes to show, I mean, how technologically advanced, that generation is compared to previous generations. So, I don't think that that one's wrong. Millennials are seen to be self-centered and overly self-confident, and that's because everybody got participation trophies and were told that they were special. I hate that. That was just unfortunately the fault of a generation of bad parenting. By the way, if you're a fan of that, then talk to me about it. All right, I'll set you straight. All right, giving everybody an award for something devalues the people that actually worked hard and came in first. Because everybody got one, right? So, I mean, what's the difference? And telling everybody that they're special and they can be anything they want to be creates this narcissistic society where everybody is the best at everything. And I got news for you. Not everybody can do everything. Not everybody can be a pro football player. Not everybody can be a pro basketball player. Not everybody can be a successful rap artist. Not everybody can be a doctor. Not everybody can be a lawyer. I mean, these things are all specific skill sets, and you either have them or you don't. And if you don't have them, then you can nurture them and you can practice, and you might get good at it, but probably not good enough to be like the best. Uh-oh. I keep glitching today. That's so weird. All right. So anyway, so millennials are seen to be self-centered and overly confident. So how do you manage that? If you're a manager, how do you manage somebody that thinks that they're better than you and they don't even know what you do for a living, right? They do not view work as central in their lives, so they're less loyal and they're less likely to sort of pay their dues. They think, well, I'm worth middle management, so I want to come straight into middle management. They don't want to start off at the bottom and work their way up, right? That's unheard of. Who does that, right? I'm me. I have a whole wall of participation trophies to show how awesome I am. Plus, my mommy said that I could be anything, including an astronaut. And instead of choosing to be an astronaut, I am choosing to work for you. So I should at least start in middle management. That's kind of the mentality, right? That's a little bit of an exaggeration. I don't mean to make fun of millennials since I'm speaking to mostly millennials, but that's kind of the attitude. And again, it's through no fault of their own. It's through incompetent parenting that parents thought they were doing their best. They thought they were doing a good deed, but in reality, it was not good. And so we've created this monster. So how do we manage this monster? Well, there's books written on how to manage millennials, and it speaks very much to these things. By the way, the most loyal generation are the baby boomers. Jobs were central to your life because that's how you pay for things. How you pay for your house and your food and bills, and without the job, you don't have any of that stuff, right? So, you remember that Maslow's hierarchy, right? You can't satisfy those physiological needs of food and shelter if you don't have a job. So it starts with the job. The job is down there in that physiological foundation part, right? It might as well be. So that's how baby boomers look at it, right? Again, millennials, not so much. So that is the industrial organizational chapter. See, much shorter than the previous chapters. I'm going to turn it off right now so we can get this run time to be short. See you for the next chapter. Are we off? I don't know if that turned off. Nope, didn't turn off. Control, Command,